All right, class, now that we've taken some time to understand a Roth conversion and the benefits that you can have and the impact that it can have on your retirement finances, now I want to dig into a little bit more of the action behind or the execution behind implementing a Roth conversion inside of your retirement finances. And admittedly, throughout the heart of this retirement taxation masterclass is these tax strategies that you can act upon. So let's dig into it. Now, as you know, we like to keep things simple here at Brighter Wealth Academy. So we've simplified these steps into a 5-step process that we call Brighter Conversions. So let's kind of review what these steps are briefly, and then I'll give you a little bit more commentary. Step 1 is understanding your tax story, and we've talked a lot about that throughout this class. Step 2 is identifying the bracket space in all 3 stages of your tax story. Step 3 is defining the acceptable tax deferred balance at RMD years. Step 4 is create and confirm your conversion timeline with your tax advisor. And step 5 is execute and adjust conversions at each annual review. So let's kind of go back and start into step number 1. And step number 1 of your Brighter Conversions, understanding your tax story. This should be something that you're very familiar with towards the end of this retirement taxation masterclass, because you've already walked through these steps. You've gathered together your income sources, your deductions, you've worked through the tax calculator to understand what your marginal rates were, and you've determined what your RMDs are, your Social Security start years. You've kind of sought to really understood your tax story at all 3 of these important stages of your retirement. So you're already there. So great job. Step 2 is identifying bracket space in all 3 of these stages. So if you go back to your tax story, you'll see in part B at the bottom that we've already identified how much additional bracket space might be in the 0, 10, 12, 22, 24, 32, 35, or 37% brackets. And so identifying your marginal rate was the first step that we already did inside of your tax story worksheet. And then the next part of that is identifying how much taxable income that you can take to remain in that same tax bracket. One caveat is that you might not want to just stay in that same tax bracket. You might be in a 10% bracket, but you feel comfortable filling up the rest of the 10% bracket and then filling up the whole 12% bracket. Or you might be in the 12% bracket and you want to fill up the 12% bracket and then the 22% bracket. Kind of depends on what your goal is and what your tax rates go up to or reduce to once you're in your RMD years. Now, step 3 is defining the acceptable tax deferred balance at your RMD year. So what do I mean by that? I mean, define what total tax deferred balance will not adversely affect your taxes once you turn 70 and a half. And so as you work through this, you together with your tax advisor are going to want to determine what your tax deferred balances are going to be and how you can actually reduce those through conversions and how much you want to reduce those through conversions. Step 3 is defining the acceptable tax deferred balance at your RMD year or your age 70 and a half. So defining a balance that will not negatively affect you is very beneficial. For example, if you have a $40,000 balance in your IRAs at your RMD year, most likely that 3.65% that comes off of that is not going to negatively impact you in your tax rate. So if that's acceptable to you, then that's okay. And you don't have to convert anymore. If using a brighter giving strategy where part of your RMD goes towards a charitable contribution, you want to take that into consideration because that could be a large part of your RMD that is not going to affect you into your taxable RMD years anyway. Step 4 is to create and confirm your conversion timeline. What we're saying here is we want you to identify a timeline and amounts to convert from your tax deferred to tax-free accounts without jumping into an undesirable tax bracket. So spreading it out over time is often recommended. You see 3 to 10 years might be an optimal window for you. The reason why we say this is if you remember back to the characteristics of a Roth conversion is unlimited. You can convert as much as you want. However, if you convert $100,000 in one taxable year, that's absolutely going to affect the tax bracket that you're in. And so you might want to spread that $100,000 out over a 3 to 10 year window as to not jump up into an undesirable tax bracket. Does that make sense? It's in this step that I would encourage you to confirm these numbers with your tax professional, whether a CPA or an agent at H&R Block, or if you do your own taxes, maybe confirm it with someone else that's familiar with tax brackets. I encourage you to confirm with your tax professional the impact and the timeline of these amounts. It's always good to kind of put a few heads together. Step 5 is executing and adjusting these conversions at each of your annual reviews. You remember back in the Brighter Giving strategy, I encourage you that every year reevaluate what your RMDs are and how much you're going to contribute to charity. This is the same principle. Once a year, make sure you adjust your numbers and evaluate if you're on track. Evaluate if tax rates have changed at all, if your income has increased at all, which might result in a less of a conversion for that year to keep you in the same lower bracket. Executing your first year's conversion is easy because you've already kind of walked through all these numbers, but I promise you, year after year, most financial situations change. So at this point is step number 5, repeating the steps above, identifying what your income is, the tax bracket is, how much space is in your tax bracket, confirming with a tax professional as you walk through these steps is absolutely advisable. In summary for this section, we wanted to give you a simple outline that you could follow in these 5 steps year after year to ensure that you're making the best decisions when it comes to your Roth conversions, converting from taxable or tax deferred into your tax-free accounts. So we appreciate you following through, and we will see you in the next lesson.